We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with.
Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World, and here are the top headlines. US President Donald Trump has lifted tariffs on beef, coffee and other agricultural products to stabilize prices and ease inflation. This move comes as his administration faces mounting pressure over rising prices. US President Donald Trump has stated that he would likely sue BBC next week for as much as $5 billion after the British broadcaster admitted it wrongly edited a video of a speech he gave but insisted that there was no legal basis for his claim. US President Donald Trump has stated that he has not thought about a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year sentence related to Jeffrey Epstein's abuse cases. In the latest sign of tensions over the Trump administration's enforcement push, nearly 24 people have been arrested as faith leaders are protesting outside Chicago's ICE facility. Trump has stated that he has made up his mind on whether he will attack Venezuela or not, a move that would escalate an already tense situation after the US has struck alleged drug ports in the Caribbean. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has urged US President Donald Trump to make peace. He has stated that the US must avoid an Afghanistan-style forever war. It comes amid American military build-up in the region. Pope Leo XIV is hosting a group of leading Hollywood actors and filmmakers at the Vatican. While speaking to them, the Pope has stated that the cinemas are struggling to survive and more should be done to protect and preserve them. The Canadian Football League is fighting fan unhappiness over upcoming rule changes. Many are protesting that the changes betray the Canadian version's proud differences from the better-known US game ahead of the championship. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order allowing a range of food products, including coffee, bananas and beef, to be exempted from tariffs which were imposed previously. Now, the move comes as his administration faces mounting pressure over rising prices. While Trump previously downplayed concerns about the cost of living, he is now focused on the issue since his Republican Party's poor performance in last week's elections. Previously, he argued that the taxes are necessary to reduce the US trade deficit, which is the gap between the value of goods it buys from other countries and those it sells to them. Trump also claimed that the US has been exploited by quote-unquote cheaters and pillaged by foreigners, adding that higher levies would encourage those in the US to buy American-made goods instead. With us on the broadcast is Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist, Spartan Capital Security, joining us from New York. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. It does seem that right after the government shutdown issue seems to have been resolved, Trump is now walking back on tariffs on certain goods, especially food items such as beef, such as coffee, agricultural produce as well. What do you make of his decisions? Because, of course, we'd seen how he vociferously went after countries back in April to impose steep tariffs, which resulted in higher prices for the American consumer.
That's exactly right. And it's no surprise to me that, eventually he would have rolled back a lot of these high tariffs. There's no question about that. I never thought anything other than that, because of the fact that they are inflationary. And he himself has admitted it. He knows that tariffs are inflation. And so I think this is good news in the sense that we can get perhaps some lower prices, maybe not totally, but certainly not the high prices that we're paying here. The American consumer is in dire straits because of elevated inflation, and especially food prices. This is a big factor for the American family. And so it's a big political risk for the administration and, of course, for the Republican Party. And that is any party who happens to be in that predicament at that time. So this is not, this is not a surprise to me. I'm surprised he didn't pull the trigger before. But I think this is good news, and I think the markets will appreciate the fact that he's taken some efforts to lower the inflationary tariff situation.
Indeed, and I also wanted to understand from you what could have sort of spurred this decision. We do know that the midterms are coming up next year, and as a precursor to that, a lot of people were looking out for the gubernatorial, the mayoral polls that have taken place in several cities in the United States. Democrats, of course, have won these. There are some analysts who argue that these are Democratic strongholds, and so they did, by virtue of that, expect Democrats to be elected. But could, these results, the sort of voting, the sort of online discourse that has been taking place, perhaps have spooked Trump into finally revoking, at least alleviating these tariffs?
Yes, of course, and if you look at the recent elections, right, in particular New York City, very true that it's a stronghold for the Democrats. They always seem to win in New York City. But this time the election was somewhat different. We had a candidate that is totally out of the norm. That is, we have a social democrat now as the new mayor. And that in itself is a loud and clear signal to the lawmakers that the citizens are not happy of what's been going on with inflation. And so we had a big protest vote. And I think that could be one of the reasons why President Trump finally realized that he needed to do something. The other thing is, the Supreme Court will be hearing, will come down with a decision in terms of the reciprocal tariffs, which are supposedly illegal. Now, if the Supreme Court should rule against President Trump, that would be a major defeat. And so he needs to reconcile. And I think, the voice of the people, once again, the protest vote certainly was, in my opinion, a spark that made the administration basically backtrack. And I think there'll be more of that coming. Look, just the other day we heard from the trade representative, the United States trade representative, that we struck a deal with Switzerland. The tariffs, the high tariffs now are back down between 10 and 15%. It's still inflationary, but it's something you can live with. And so I think that's going to happen with all the countries. I think these high tariffs, even high tariffs imposed in India, I think eventually that will come down. And I think it's going to happen, by year end. So you might say that it's a semi-defeat for the present administration, because they have realized that high tariffs are inflationary, and at the end, no one wins. No one wins.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I request you to stay on with us. Of course, we're yet to see how the Supreme Court's decision plays out, and the soybean factor as well, considering that Trump's MAGA voter base is from the location, from the Midwest, where these soybeans are grown, which we're, of course, seeing the exports not taking place to China, though China has stated that it will be resuming it, but it's also grappling with the glut, so we're yet to see how that plays out. Request you to stay on as we're now tracking further updates. We're now learning that the BBC is facing a potentially costly legal battle after US President Donald Trump has stated that he plans to pursue suing the British broadcaster for up to $5 billion US. Now, the announcement follows the corporation's admission that it wrongly edited a video of Trump's 6 January 2021 speech for its flagship program, The Panorama. Trump's lawyers had initially demanded a retraction, apology, and at least $1 billion in compensation, citing overwhelming reputational and financial harm. Listen in.
Well, we'll sue them. We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So you're ready to take?
Well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated. I mean, not that they couldn't have not done that. They cheated. They changed the words coming out of my mouth.
While the BBC sent a personal apology and acknowledged the editing was quote-unquote an error of judgment, it has rejected the defamation claim and refused to pay compensation, arguing that the program was not broadcast in the US and caused no demonstrable harm. The controversy has already led to the resignation of the BBC's Director General and CEO, plunging the broadcaster into one of its biggest crises in decades. The potential lawsuit could divert top BBC officials from ongoing discussions over the renewal of its charter, which is due in 2028, and result in significant legal expenses as well. The latest that we're tracking on the broadcast as far as Trump's battle with the BBC is concerned. Let's in fact play out that soundbite of Donald Trump reiterating that he's likely to sue the British broadcaster for up to $5 billion US. All right, I requested the team to play out that soundbite once again, if we can do that.
Well, we'll sue them. We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So you're ready to take?
Well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated. I mean, not that they couldn't have not done that. They cheated. They changed the words coming out of my mouth.
Then, of course, Trump saying that they cheated and changed the words coming out of his mouth. Remember, there were 2 segments, more than 50 minutes apart, which were spliced together to paint a different color. This, of course, has raised a lot of questions regarding the ethics of journalism, whether free speech is really a license to twist facts, the implications of doing so for none other than a sitting US president, and of course some BBC presenters doubling down and stating that it's a coordinated, politically motivated attack on public service broadcasting, which some question as a bit to divert from the core issue of the violation of journalistic ethics that we've seen. More focus shifting to news coming in. US President Donald Trump's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has once again come under scrutiny after US lawmakers released more than 20,000 pages of documents from Epstein's estate, including some that mentions Trump's name. US Democrats in the House Oversight Committee, which is a federal body that oversees government functions, released email exchanges between Epstein and some of his associates in which the former financier appeared to suggest that Trump knew about his conduct towards young girls, after which the US Republicans released 20,000 documents from Epstein's estate in a bid to counter the Democrats' email releases, claiming that the Democrats had cherry-picked documents to paint a false narrative against Trump. Trump, who had a 15-year-long friendship with Epstein, denies all wrongdoing and has repeatedly stated that he was never involved in or knew about Epstein's sexual crimes. Listen in to what Trump had to say.
His emails when he said you knew about the girls?
I know nothing about that. They would have announced that a long time ago. It's really, what did he mean when he spent all the time with Bill Clinton, with the president of Harvard, who you know, who that is, Summers, Larry Summers, whatever his name is, and all of the other people that he spent time with. Jeffrey Epstein and I had a very bad relationship for many years.
Meanwhile, Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has stated that the battle over the release of the Epstein files has sent Donald Trump over the edge after he publicly withdrew his support for the Georgia Congresswoman. Greene, who is a standard bearer of the MAGA movement and formerly a strong supporter of Trump, also noted that it is astonishing to see how hard Trump is fighting to stop the files from coming out. We're tracking more updates from the United States. We're now learning that nearly 24 people have been outside a federal immigration facility near Chicago in the U.S. state of Illinois. These arrests follow protests by faith leaders against enforcement raids. Now, authorities say that 21 people have been detained so far outside ICE Processing Center in Broadview in Illinois, although their identities and charges have not been released yet. The said facility has become a hot focal point for many activists opposing Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Listen in to what one such protester who was held by the police authorities had to say.
This is wrong. I'm here because there's torture in that facility. It's a concentration camp because my conscience calls me to do it. What's happening here is evil, and the Illinois State Police are complicit in it. They're evil themselves.
Now, since September, we've seen ICE operations in Chicago intensifying, leading to regular clashes with demonstrators. Authorities have reportedly used tear gas, less lethal rounds, flashbang grenades, and pepper balls in response in several occasions. Meanwhile, a federal judge in October had earlier restricted some crowd control tactics, including tear gas deployment without warning. The Department of Homeland Security has not commented on these particular arrests yet. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Matthew Wadham, American journalist, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us. We're now learning that nearly 24 people have been arrested while protesting outside an ICE facility in Washington. We've seen how the Department of Homeland Security and these immigration enforcement officers have been intensifying their crackdown over the last couple of months, despite a ruling from a federal judge. Is what's taken place likely to be challenged in the court? And if so, what sort of legal battles does the Trump administration face?
I think the people were arrested outside of Chicago, not Washington, D.C., to correct you. But this has just, become a routine daily thing. It's part of an ongoing far-left insurrection against the United States government, where far-left people, Antifa, anarchists, communists, and extremist church leaders are leading an insurrection against the United States to prevent it from enforcing its immigration laws. I don't. You have a right to protest in the United States. You do not have a right to use violence or to obstruct government facilities. And so I'm not surprised that some people in Chicago have been arrested for their efforts to shut down ICE activities, ICE immigration enforcement activities there. I understand a judge thought that ICE was being too harsh and, restricted their use of tear gas. So that's there for the time being. But I don't see any reason why the left would change its playbook and call off all of the at times violent demonstrations that they have been conducting in an effort to stop the United States government from enforcing the laws of the land.
Absolutely. This is something that even, a lot of people have pointed out, despite the protesters saying that they do have a right to protest. The question, of course, is the federal law that is being imposed over here, and the obstruction to justice, as you've pointed out as well. But as you mentioned, we've been seeing a lot of faith leaders also now come out and decry what is taking place. To what extent do faith leaders in particular, what extent is the role that they play in shaping the public discourse around the raids that are taking place?
I think that people, leaders in churches, priests, ministers, rabbis, and so on, are influencers, and they have an impact on their congregations. That doesn't mean that everyone in their congregation always agrees with everything that they say. I can recall going to various churches and not always agreeing 100% with what the preacher was saying during the sermon. And this is not an uncommon experience, just as a lot of Catholics rejected the extreme far left teachings of Pope Francis when he was alive. So I think that church leaders have an influence, but I don't think that we should overstate their influence on what is going on. I think that the American people want U.S. immigration laws to be enforced, and clips such as the one you showed of someone describing ICE as organizing concentration camps. This is horrific propaganda. ICE does not have concentration camps. They're trying to compare ICE, in other words, the United States government, to the Nazi regime. And this is just unacceptable public discourse, totally over the top. And, as long as these people maintain this tack, most Americans are going to continue to ignore them.
Indeed, we've also seen a lot of discourse or rhetoric from the Democrats in particular. We've seen these raids take place not just in Chicago, but in other Democrat-led cities as well. We've seen the Trump administration deploy the National Guard in order to curb crime, but there's been considerable pushback from Democrat leaders. What do you make of their stance? People such as Pritzker have also pointed out towards the First Amendment right to free speech, and stating that those who are protesting, they have proper identification, they are accountable as well.
I think that Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's main objection was that he didn't like National Guard troops troops, federalized Illinois National Guard troops or troops from any other state coming to his state and usurping the state's law enforcement function. I think that was his main concern, but he is also a strong supporter of illegal immigration, and he wants to protect his base, which is supportive of illegal immigrants, of illegal aliens. Democrats depend on illegal aliens to improve their political fortunes, because the more illegal aliens you have in a state, they get counted in the U.S. Census, and that gives you more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. So Democrats are very protective of illegal aliens. So it is not surprising that Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is upset that President Trump is trying to actually deport some of the illegal aliens in his state of Illinois, and that he has sent troops there, or I'm not sure if he's sent troops. I think he has sent troops, sorry. He sent troops there and is trying to to execute federal laws there. Again, as I said earlier, this is an insurrection against federal authority. If Democrats and advocates for illegal aliens don't like the law, they should ask the United States Congress to change it instead of using violence and threats and intimidation to try to prevent good, hardworking immigration agents from doing their jobs and enforcing the laws of the land.
Speaking of the violence, we've not just seen arson attacks take place. There was also a shooting that happened back in September at an ICE facility in Dallas. There was a sniper who was targeting ICE officers. Although no ICE officer was injured, 2 of the detainees were killed, and there were some bullets recovered near the shooter, who had of course died of a self-inflicted wound after carrying out his attack, with anti-ICE written on those bullets. What do you make of this increasing violence that we're witnessing in these protests and outside as well regarding and against these officers?
Well, as I've said a few times, this is a violent insurrection led by far left, by communists, anarchists, and Antifa people, or Antifa people, anti-fascist activists trying to prevent the federal government from enforcing federal immigration law. And it's not at all surprising that they're violent. I mean, they murdered Charlie Kirk, the outspoken conservative leader, in September, and there were two leftists, apparent leftists, made assassination attempts against President Trump last year on the campaign trail. So these are just violent people, and I'm not surprised that they continue to be violent, and as they continue losing the battle to prevent illegal aliens from being removed from the United States, as U.S. immigration law requires, I'm not surprised that their violence is escalating.
Indeed, and as you pointed out, what we're seeing is basically some sort of organized protests taking place. These are not sporadic. The nature of these protests point to the fact that these are rather sustained. So it's obvious that funding is taking place from somewhere. Do you think the Trump administration should also then focus on snipping away the funding that takes place behind these protests, the organized money that really goes into the machinery behind these protests, and not just the immigration itself?
I think that the Trump administration has recently had a eureka moment, and it opened its eyes and recognized finally that these movements are being funded by radical billionaires like George Soros, and they are beginning to look at how he funds these groups that promote sometimes violent actions intended to frustrate government policy. And there are a number of ways that the government is doing this. President Trump recently issued orders declaring Antifa a foreign terrorist organization because of its ties to groups abroad. Originally comes from Germany many years ago, and there's that going on, and there are also I think there are investigations starting or being contemplated in Congress about George Soros and these far left groups, that far left foundations, wealthy foundations funded by him, and activist groups in turn that are funded by those foundations, and how they are doing these things. And people like George Soros will always say, I didn't authorize them to do this, but he keeps funding these groups knowing what they do. So, he's not directly complicit in what's going on, but he is an indirect contributor to it by being a financial contributor to these violent organizations.
Absolutely. So with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your analysis of what's transpiring, the web behind these protests as well. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the United States of America towards the United Kingdom. We're now learning that parts of England and Wales have faced severe flood warnings after Storm Claudia brought intense rainfall across the United Kingdom. The Met Office has warned that conditions remain hazardous, with flooding likely due to already saturated grounds. In Pontypridd, near the River Taff, local residents have moved equipment to higher levels to protect it from rising waters. South Wales has experienced widespread flooding, leading to the cancellation of train services to London and Swansea. Authorities have also declared a major incident in Monmouth. Emergency responders have been conducting evacuations and relocating residents to safety. Storm Claudia's heavy rains continue to pose significant risks, and officials are urging residents to remain vigilant and follow safety guidance. More news coming in. We're now learning that Pope Leo XIV is hosting Hollywood actors and filmmakers in the Vatican. While speaking to the group, the Pope has stated that cinemas are struggling to survive and that more should be done to protect them and preserve the shared experience of watching movies. Screen stars Cate Blanchett, Monica Bellucci, Chris Pine and Oscar-winning director Spike Lee were among those at the gathering. Pope Leo XIV, the first US Pope, has stated that cinema is a vital workshop of hope at a time of global uncertainty and digital overload. Box office revenues in many countries remain well below the levels recorded before the COVID-19 pandemic, with multiplexes in the US and Canada just suffering their worst summer since 1981, excluding the COVID shutdown itself. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on America 360. We will continue to track these updates very, very closely. On that note, a quick short break.